So we're doing a reaction to Mentiswave's Reddit video. Nice.
Hey internets. First of all, this video has no sponsor, but since I'm gonna be making fun of some commie stupidity in this video, I'm gonna put a couple of my anti-communist shirts on sale. Both Commies Ride Free and Inoperable shall be on sale on the merch store. So if you want to support the channel while also getting some excellent quality swag, a link for those will be in the description below. But anyways, one thing I've noticed about the socialists and tankies and whatnot who act as apologists for the Chinese Communist Party is that not only are they completely blind to basic logic and reasoning, but they're also kind of completely insane in many ways. Specifically in ways that are actually kind of funny. So yeah, this is going to be a follow-up to my more serious video, which was refuting the main cope that they have, which is the cope that the Chinese Communist Party became successful through communism, when in reality they are neither communist nor are they really that successful. Whereas with this video, I'd like to showcase just how out of touch with reality you have to be to unironically defend the CCP. Let's start with this one. Zoran Mamdani on Twitter says, a society that produces billionaires while millions go hungry isn't successful, it's broken. I don't think we should have billionaires, full stop. And then the response being, a socialist sees a luxurious lifestyle and says no one should live this way. A capitalist sees a luxurious lifestyle and says everyone should live this way. To which a
Yep, that's basically it.
Jen Zedong member, which if you don't know, that's a subreddit for people who are pro-Chinese Communist Party, states that that's just a terrible argument. When of course that's actually a perfectly reasonable argument. The entire point of how the free market helps the working poor is that those of us who support it, we've recognized that the main thing that helps the working class is really just economic growth. And so when capitalism comes in to free the market from regulation, when you do that, often within the generation,
I never understood this meme. They're supporting free. This it's showing that it's a desirable outcome for people to watch a baseball game without paying for a ticket or watching it officially. Hold on. How does my mic sound weird? No how, I don't know how to fix it. Is it different from usual? Is this better? Okay. Progress, I guess.
we'll see an improvement in the quality of life at the bottom. And of course, to reach the same quality of life as billionaires, well, that does take a while. But the thing is, the history shows that it did indeed happen. If you are working class in the United States, you actually enjoy a quality of life that is higher than that of millionaires from back in the 1800s in the United States. If you had the choice between, say, being a railway CEO back in those days, or as the working class today, you're better off in the US as working class today. Whereas communism, on the other hand, socialist programs can make people more equal, but then it stunts the growth. That's why when you look at places like North Korea today, it almost looks like they're frozen in time in the 1960s and 70s. And so while it may seem counterintuitive to a person who doesn't really understand economics, it is actually more generous to the working poor to be in favor of capitalism. And of course, do Reddit communists understand this? No.
No, of course not.
The first response to this is the capitalist
Is this
sees the luxurious lifestyle and thinks I should live
is this
they are
better?
incapable of considering anyone else any further than how they would
Hold on. Forget you saw this.
benefit the capitalists. That's probably even being generous to them. And this perfectly highlights the
Wait,
tanky capitalists.
I was so busy. The capitalist sees the luxurious lifestyle and thinks, I should live this way. They are incapable of considering anyone else any further than how they would benefit the capitalist. That's probably even being generous to them.
Of considering anyone else any further than how they would benefit the capitalists. That's probably even being generous to them. And this perfectly highlights the tanky mentality in terms of capitalism. A lot of these people have spent so long in an echo chamber.
What? What is this thing?
That a huge portion of their arguments end up being complete straw man arguments or moralistic fallacies. Or of course in this case both. And so they have absolutely no understanding of what the opposing side actually believes. Next up is this one from r/moving to North Korea, which apparently used to be a parody subreddit, but is now an actual unironic defender of the CCP as well as the North Korean government subreddit. And what we have—
Wow. The amount of fuel this singular man has given to Western xenophobia and anti-communism is astounding. It needs to be studied.
Have here is the amount of fuel this singular man has given to Western xenophobia and anti-communism is astounding. It needs to be studied. David Zhang of the China Fakes Everything series. Now this is a perfect demonstration of two different kinds of weird ways that tankies like to think. The first of these is that they really like dumb rhetoric. People love to spin things that aren't phobias as phobias. They think—
You disagree with me? That's a phobia, pal. No, it really isn't, Mr. Wojak.
that by calling criticism of something a phobia, then that criticism somehow magically becomes less valid. And midwits love doing this for some reason. They think that if they can just ignore what the other side is saying and instead—
Phobia? It's not a phobia. I'm not afraid. It's absolute disgust. And it's the Dragon Quest slime on freaking headphones. I want that.
Their views as a phobia, then that just means they win the argument. It's kind of silly, kind of fascinating, really. Honestly, maybe that's what really needs to be studied here. And the other hand is just the tanky mindset of what is propaganda. One of the standard go-to tanky arguments against anything that makes one of their favorite totalitarian regimes look bad is to spin it some way as Western propaganda. And thus, anytime an individual leaves one of those regimes, or in some cases has to escape, and then gives a first-hand account of how bad it is to live there, or how crappy and corrupt the government is, the tankies can simply turn their brains off because it's late Western propaganda. And then even sillier, they'll often cite that government's claim that they did nothing wrong as proof that they did nothing wrong. And they'll—
Really? When the government says anything, they're usually lying.
Cite various media sources from that country claiming so, which of course completely ignores the fact that a lot of these regimes just don't have a free—
The same people who unironically say stuff like, what? This politician, this Democrat politician is corrupt? No, they aren't. We would see it on the government-run news. The government is corrupt? No, it's not. We would see it on the government-sponsored news if it was true.
Press, like in the case of China. The CCP has direct control over all media in China, and it is legitimately against the law to criticize the CCP using any kind of media in China. So of course—
Article 35 of China's Constitution. My mic might be topped out. What the heck does that mean? Article 35 of China's Constitution states that citizens— Any other— Is that better? Is this better? Tell me. Okay. Article 35 of China's Constitution states that citizens of the People's Republic of China enjoy freedom of speech, of the press, of assembly, of association, of procession and of demonstration. Formally speaking, this language seems to accord with Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which states everyone has the right to freedom of opinion.
The media there is always going to say that the Chinese Communist Party didn't do anything wrong, because they're not allowed to say otherwise. That's what happens when you have no free press, so to speak. And sure, I mean, some level they're pedantically correct. A lot of Western media has a lot of propaganda in it as well. But that's because a lot of the Western mainstream media has ties to the Western state, where the CCP, on the other hand, just goes all in. Next up is this cope. Same driver, 26 years apart in China. 1996 seems to be a steam locomotive. In 2022, it's all nice and modernized, much more speedy train. Look how much better everything looks. Now, in all seriousness, at first, this might not seem like it's really much of anything. In fact, it might even seem a little bit wholesome, until you realize what it is they're really saying here, which just kind of goes hand in hand with the claim that China lifted the most people out of poverty, and that Chinese communism led to a great amount of economic growth in the last 50 years, completely ignoring the fact that the reason China was able to lift people out of poverty is because China had the most share of the world's poverty at the time, and all of their innovations in the last 50 years is funded by the private sector that they created. In other words, they just kind of stopped being communist. They're communists in name only. And Tankies just kind of ignore these facts and worship the CCP anyways. So let's look at another cope. Another from Jen Zedong. I'll take projection for 800, Alex. The United States. LOL, in China, they pretend nothing happened at Tiananmen Square. United States history, education, and the Indians taught the colonists how to grow corn. Smiley face. Now, this one is kind of another example of a little bit of pedantic correctness. Yes, it's true that United States history is definitely very much watered down. However, in United States history, they at least admit that yes, the colonists did kill a little bit of the Indians. There's no claim that they did nothing wrong. There's no attempt to completely delete it from the history, something that the CCP actually does. The CCP actually claims that they did nothing wrong. And also there's just a little bit of a tu quoque in here. If it turns out that the United States is in fact just as bad as China, then that would just be proof that both are bad. There's no point being proven there. It doesn't take away the fact that the Chinese Communist Party is guilty of a lot of horrible things, and then tries to later cover it up with blatant gaslighting and their total control of the media. So it's like they're comparing a mountain to a molehill and then claiming that because the molehill exists, the mountain doesn't exist. It's an impressively stupid argument. Next scope. Yes, from the program, we have the Uyghur people proudly waving the flag of the Chinese Communist Party against the Turkistani jihadists supported by the lie of the Uyghur genocide outside the mosque. Yep, we wouldn't be talking about Tankies if we weren't getting into some good old-fashioned genocide denial. That's kind of the way that the Tankies work. They just have to deny anything that their favored regimes are doing wrong, usually with the evidence that because their favored regime said so. Or in this case, a singular image of a Uyghur holding a Chinese Communist Party flag. Therefore, the CCP isn't doing anything wrong against the Uyghur people. None of those crimes are happening. It's just the total cope here. Just the total lack of reasoning. It's really bizarre. There's plenty of evidence of the CCP subjecting Uyghur people who have done nothing wrong to things like forced labor camps and forced organ harvesting. But hey, all of that evidence just magically doesn't exist because we've got a Uyghur here waving the flag of the Chinese Communist Party. Again, that's the problem with these Reddit echo chambers. These people are so used to never having their beliefs meaningfully challenged that they get comfortable with making obviously stupid arguments that would never pass muster in a neutral setting. I mean, imagine any other genocide being denied using this reasoning. Oh hey, insert genocide here didn't happen or isn't happening because here's a member of the group that is being genocided holding a flag. Therefore, genocide not happening. I mean, it's just absolutely freaking unreal. There isn't even a fallacy to really properly describe the level of absurdity here. This is legitimately just cactus divided by cat butt logic. I have nothing else to say. Next scope. From r/communism memes, China got COVID right. Wojak1 saying lockdowns are tyranny, and then a guy supposedly representing the CCP saying we save millions of lives. This is pretty much just the same safety versus freedom problem that we always see. And like all skewed arguments, it again has a little bit of pedantic correctness to it. Yes, technically, you could say things like car crashes cause millions of deaths, and we could prevent those deaths by reducing the speed limit to 5 miles per hour. Yeah, technically, you would reduce automobile accidents by quite a lot if you did that, at the cost of completely destroying the economy, which would likely have a second-order effect of causing many other deaths in other ways. Same problem here. When you give the government as much power as the CCP has, when it comes to things like this, like how they handled the COVID pandemic, you could argue that they saved some lives. But did they really? Maybe maybe save some lives from COVID, but if someone's locked inside their own apartment from being cemented in and starves to death, or doesn't get treatment, or something along those lines that causes them to die, I mean,
Yep.
did they really help them? And did they really
Nope.
help the rest of the population? Because China got hit by COVID pretty hard anyway. In fact, it was the actions of the CCP and how they denied COVID at first that arguably caused it to be a global pandemic in the first place. And I think that's the real problem with this when it comes to the question of trading liberty for safety. A lot of the people who lean more towards safety and lean more towards government regulation in cases like pandemics and such, a lot of them are just kind of ignoring second order effects. They're ignoring the downside of giving a law.
Oh, I love this. I love this interaction. It's one of my favorite on the internet. How to prevent mass shootings. Make getting a gun as difficult as it is to vote. You want them mailed out to everyone? I mean, yeah, that would probably reduce mass shootings if people had guns and were willing and able to shoot criminals. Yeah, that would make crime harder to do.
Large centralized authority that much power. Yes, they may consequentially do some good, but then consequences in the long run may end up being worse overall, and for reasons you may not have even thought of at first. And people who defend authoritarian regimes, they just tend to not really think about that at all. It's kind of sad, really. But let's look at one last quote. Visiting the working class home, China versus the US, from again, Jen Zedong. So here's President Xi being all nice and friendly
What's
to a random
that?
working class person. So wholesome. In contrast to this meme about Hillary Clinton, I will never forget the look on Hillary's face when she went into the home of a working class family. Now, in some ways, in a very silly way, this one is kind of based because it's making fun of Hillary Clinton for being completely out of touch with reality because, well, she kinda is. But on the other hand, this is another case of weird tanky to quoqui, and also just blatant misdirection. People's reactions here don't really matter. I mean, we kind of all know that a lot of US politicians, especially Hillary Clinton, well, these people very blatantly live in a bubble. They have a very poor understanding of what the rest of us Americans put up with. But of course, the comparison to Z falls flat for two very obvious reasons. The first of which is that it's really just a misdirection from the fact that the United States working class family still lives a lot better than the Chinese working class. In fact, your standard average apartment that you might find someone in the working class in the US living in is honestly in many ways better than the Chinese middle class. And the tankies are just kind of ignoring that in favor of instead looking at how their dear leaders react. But the second problem, and one that really I think reveals the main problem of the tanky mentality, comes down to this comment right here. The people of China seem to genuinely love and respect their leader and are always happy to have him around, and he cares for his people too. The people of America definitely can't say the same. Okay, honestly, do you actually think that President Xi cares about the working class of China, at least any more than a random American politician? The answer
Last I checked, politicians don't care about anyone but themselves.
is no, obviously he doesn't. It's just that the CCP has much more direct control over the media and much more totalitarian control over what they can get away with and how they treat their people. If these people seen in these clips and seen in these videos and seen in these pictures did not seem to genuinely love and respect their leader and did not look like they were always happy to have him around, then they would be thrown into the labor camps along with the Uyghurs. And these people, they're just not even
Beijing Xin on School of Re-Education through labor.
considering that. They're completely ignoring the fact that there is no free press and no freedom of expression in China. And so this guy smiling at President Xi could not get away with not smiling. And this really summarizes the tanky mentality. A lot of their beliefs really do stem from the fact that they just take the propaganda of these authoritarian regimes at face value and just apply no reasoning whatsoever towards questioning that propaganda. They just don't consider any other possibility. Or even worse, they may even have the postmodernist take where they think that because this state media of the CCP doesn't have any internal opposition to it, because, you know, they made it illegal for such opposition to exist, then that propaganda of the CCP magically becomes true. And that effectively summarizes the mentality of the tanky. Their epistemology really is just appeal to authority. Kind of funny, but again, kind of sad. And that's all I...
Alright, that's the video. See ya.
not gonna go well for me, I think.